Hello, this is a brief video for our Parenting for Racial Justice course focusing on adolescent age children, roughly grade 7th to 12th grade, and what we can be doing as parents and as educators to support our children in becoming anti-racist and overall helping them to have a lens for racial justice. One of the things that we can begin to have conversations with our children once they are 12 and older is starting to talk about privilege. This is a concept that would um, not really make sense to kids much younger than this. And so I think it's important to be mindful of that. Perhaps it might come up in conversations when your children are younger, but just know, kind of conceptualizing this is it is going to be an older kid thing. It's helpful for parents who are white to be able to talk with their white children about um, the white cultural perspective and privilege, and how the perspective and life experiences of um, BIPOC classmates may be very different than theirs. Um, so when these types of conversations might happen organically is if your child brings up a conversation at the dinner table about something that happened at school, or a discussion that they've had, or something that's happening in class. You don't have to wait for those discussions to come up organically, but just know that they might naturally do so. So you could prompt those questions as well. Discuss what they can do to make sense of their own privilege and how to not allow it to harm those without the same privileges. One of the things that there can be shame, and I believe we touched on this a little bit in one of our classes, but some shame surrounding white privilege, and we need to pause to consider why we have those feelings, but we certainly don't want to be pushing our children to feel shame for their whiteness. Um, but we really do want to push them to see the perspectives of um, people people of color, so they understand that life has probably been very different for them, and even pointing out the example of a child or a teenager who is black when he's shopping in a store. Unfortunately, he might be very likely to be followed around by one of the store managers or store workers to make sure he's not stealing. Totally not okay, totally not right in any way, but your white children may not even realize that's a thing. Some of you may not even realize that's a thing because you may never have had to have that experience. But we know that parents of children who are black or of color have had to have those conversations with their kids, and so to be mindful of that, because that's something that they can speak up about if they're working at a store, if they have been guided by their employer to watch a certain type of person um, more so than others. That's a problem. We want them to be ready to, well, first of all, we want them to be able to see when something isn't right, and we want them to be ready to push back. If they don't know how to best push back, to have that comfort level to come to you and talk to you about that and brainstorm how they might be able to have that conversation, for example, with their employer or teacher, even. Um, and again, just having discussions about their experiences and how those might differ from their classmates. I probably weekly, my kids and I have conversations. Things come up either through something in the media. My children are 16 and 17. Things will come up in the media, or they'll bring up a situation that they've encountered with a friend, or they've heard about a situation from a friend, and we'll talk it through and talk about how hard that would be if that was that how hard that is, that that's their reality. For example, one of my son's good friends was targeted at a bowling alley recently, called the N word out of nowhere. There was no leading up to it. My son was not with, but he heard about it very soon after. And luckily, their group of kids, their friends that really rallied around him, the bowling alley acted very quickly and kicked this other person out. But just we had a pretty in-depth conversation about that and just how that might feel. And my son's response at first was like, it probably does, I don't think it bothers him. And that, well, he might act like it's not bothering him, but that's a really hard thing to experience and not have it bother you at all, because he had to have been wondering then when he goes out to his car after, is that person going to be waiting for me? And certainly, um, it's such an awful thing to be be targeted for something we can't control, right? We can't control the color of our skin. I can't control that I'm white, just like somebody who is black can't control that they're black. I can't control that I have green eyes. I can't control that I have curly hair for the most part. So just helping our children see these things. And again, the adolescent years, their brain can conceptualize those. They are ready to think deeper. And it in many ways it can be a very exciting time to be parenting, because the depth of conversations can be so great at that point. Continuing to talk about history, hopefully that you've been having discussions about history prior to this, but again, you can go in even more depth. They will be ready for movies to be viewed that they weren't ready for in elementary school. The depth of articles that they'd be able to read, podcasts if that's something they're into, or documentaries or things like that. All of these things that won't necessarily be interested to in every for sorry that every adolescent will be interested in, but at least they would be ready for this. So you know that, hey, my kid's 13. Could I watch this with him? Could we have this discussion? Yes, yes, yes. And again, we talked about this in the last video, is learn together about racism in America. And to try to do that as much as possible from BIPOC writers and creators. When we've talked about, I mentioned, I think in the first series or the first part one, that I've been wanting to do a class like this for over almost 2 years now, and I knew as a white person I couldn't do this topic justice, and it was important to me to, if I'm going to take on this topic, that I want to do it well. And just how fabulous that we were able to pull together a team that not only had personal experiences to pull from, but also phenomenal professional experiences to pull from as well. So really consider that when you're looking at material that you want to read, but also that you want to share with your adolescent. Current events, I mean, again, something that, I mean, my kids often hear about current events before I do, actually, because, well, they're teenagers and they're on their phone often, and talk about how they impact their life indirectly and directly. Challenge your teens to consider the importance of caring about current events, even if they don't appear to directly impact your child. So there are probably many teenagers that said the events at the Capitol on January 6th didn't really bother them because it didn't impact their life. And it is our responsibility to help our teenagers see the ways that it really does impact them, even if it doesn't feel like it. And to be able to talk that through with kids. Allow your teen to respectfully debate on difficult social issues. This really helps them form critical thinking skills. It can help you too. It can help you define more of your beliefs. And again, that works for them as well. Ask them to check their facts if they sound questionable. It's really important too. I know Claire has talked about this in many of our meetings about um, teenagers are pretty quick to quote things that they saw on social media, but really haven't been fact checked. And so that is something in our with things so easily in our hands, and for our eyes to view, things aren't always the right kind of news. And so to make sure you're helping your teenager decipher that, and again, checking them, teaching them to source check, to make sure it is a credible